one of the things that I've noticed in the market is that this is an area that staffing MSPs are taking on. They're really starting to get stuck into this area where they're developing services and already providing services around this triage type of scenario. My own personal view is that it's still quite embryonic in the market generally, whether people are doing it directly, whether people are using an MSP, but it's interesting that that's springing from suppliers that would be traditionally associated with primarily contingent workforce. But I guess when you look at it, there's similar problem-solving skills involved in defining work and defining how it gets done and making sure that it's compliant with the relevant regulations that could apply to how you buy services under a statement of work. But when you look within organizations, the area that deals with buying services from consultancy, for example, in procurement, to your point earlier, needs to get closer to the parts of procurement that are used to buying time and materials, labor. And I think you could end up with, like say, kind of super categories or new roles that are purely based around the work, not the worker. So what is it that needs to be done? What's the most effective route to market? Which channels do we have? Is that a gig marketplace? Is it a permanent headcount? Is it a contractor? Is it an outsourced project delivered under a statement of work? And be able to plug in these different options. That's the kind of ultimate panacea of strategic workforce planning or work design type concepts. But I do feel like at the moment, it's as far as that sits within procurement, it's not very well aligned generally.
Yeah, I think you're right, Johnny, and that for me is probably a big reason as to why it's taken as long as it has. Because actually, everything that you and I are talking through, Johnny, there are some elements which might be new to folk, but actually, there's a lot in there where you'll have your audience kind of nodding and smiling, saying, "Actually, I've seen that, and I've seen that happening for 10 years." And then, if we ask ourselves the question, why is it actually taken so long to fix some of these areas? I think you're right. And for me, I think about the stuff inside, right? So what are some of the internal factors that have really stopped this from progressing and only really allowed the contingent workforce programs to progress? What about everything else? And then I think there's a series of external factors also that hasn't allowed for services procurement to mature in the way we would like to see it today. And when we look at the external side, we are talking about low market maturity for services procurement, and you've talked about that. You've talked about the MSPs now getting into this space, which I think is a great idea, because I think they bring with them a huge amount of experience and knowledge in this space to now say, okay, we've done contingent worker programs really well. There are a lot of similarities in managing statement of work. Of course, there's differences too, but how do we reapply some of that knowledge with our scale to help some of our clients, right? So if we go back a few years, the market maturity was not there. You will have some folks that argue, actually, maybe it's still not there. There's a few folks that are doing it, but actually the world is changing. And I think some of the solution today will come from smaller point solutions, right? Some of the great work that you guys are doing as well, Johnny, I think is going to help with that. And then on the other side of the external market, we start thinking about market convergence, right? All of the different suppliers and how their businesses have changed. And, I talked about it earlier on as well about, how much of it was purely due to survival. Maybe some of it was due to growth opportunities. Maybe some of it is due to diversification. But it's happening. And those market convergences have been happening for a while. And then, of course, you've got new entrants, right, that are creating some incredibly exciting disruption, which for somebody like me on the buy side of the table, I've been waiting for that for years. But it's one of those reasons why the market has been quite slow, right? And this is still a business problem that many organizations are trying to fix. So that's some of the external stuff, right? And then we've talked about the stuff on the inside, which is what are some of the internal factors. We've talked about corporate policies, right? When these policies are being written within large organizations, they have a very focused goal. And hindsight's great, right? It's great for anybody to sit here and look back and say, well, actually, the indirect consequence of that policy around headcount is that you have driven spend going the wrong way. And actually, if you work that through, the impact that's had on your bottom line is probably quite significant, right? So policies have always been something which I think have really slowed down the fix here. We talked about the functional alignment as being another area that has probably slowed down the progress in this space. And all of those things are driving buying behaviors, right? So it's often really easy for a procurement guy to be like, yeah, but the stakeholders doing this, and actually we should self-reflect and we should say how much of the processes or policies or governance that we've set up that have been in our control are probably driving some of those behaviors.